Now, next exercise, what we're doing is, we're on page 4, you've got this chart. Now, a lot of these words are in the Fatiha, in the first chapter of the Quran, so I'm assuming you know some of them. You're not expected to know a lot of them, so you go through them, what you know, what you don't. But try, and then you're going to state, are they nouns or verbs or particles, these words? Okay, so have a go. I'll give you about 5 minutes just to go through them. Right, stop there. I know you haven't finished it, but as I said, you're not going to know a lot of these words, but I wanted to expose you to something. What we're doing here is, this is something that's one part of the course that's really important, is we're trying to appreciate the nuances of the words. What you're going to realize here is that you can't translate a lot of words until they're put into a context, okay? And some of them you're going to really see this. Now, Arabic words generally are derived from 3-letter roots. Now, you're not going to be used to this at first, many of you, and when I ask you what's a 3-letter root, you might not know, and that's normal. It's going to take you a while to get used to that. But let's look at it. So, Rasul, what's it mean? What did you translate it as? Messenger. Anyone say anything different? An emissary. Okay. Okay, is everyone happy with that? So, first and foremost, you've got to, if you're translating this, you've got to put a before it. You can't say messenger. You've got to say a messenger. Because in Arabic, things are inherently indefinite in their nature until you define them. It makes sense if you think about it. If I say, for example, a cat, we start off with not knowing it, don't we? And then we learn it. Yeah? So if you've never met a cat, but if you've never known a cat before, the first time I mention it, it's not going to be defined, is it? It's not a cat I've spoken about because you've never seen one before. So it's indefinite, it's undefined. And so in English, we have indefinite particles. We say like a book, don't we? And if it's definite, what do we say? The book. In Arabic, it's not like that. Everything is a, so we don't need a particle to say a. And then if it becomes definite, then we say the. Okay. So all of what the practical point here is, on all these words, if they're nouns, you should be saying a before them. Okay, that's really important. So it's not messenger. Don't write messenger. What should you write? A messenger. Okay. Now, this is a difficult, as I said, what's the 3-letter root of messenger? Sorry, is it a noun, verb, or particle? Sorry. A noun. We can conceptualize that, it's fine. Okay. Is it, what's the 3-letter root? Ra, Sin, Lam. Now, you say, well, why is it not the were? You'll get used to it, don't worry. Okay. Okay. So it's a bit of guesswork at first. But it's Ra, Sin, Lam. Now, any word that has this 3-letter root in it, it's going to be linked, it's going to have a similar meaning. This is what actually helps in Arabic a lot. Any word that has its root as Ra, Sin, Lam, it will have a similar meaning. Now, what it means is, Rasala means to release something, and it has a suggestion that it's something from above that's sent to something below. Okay? So when we say Rasul, because a lot of students in my other classes said, well, isn't it prophet? We're going to talk about this. What's the difference between Nabi and what's the difference between Nabi and Rasul? The nuances, the meaning is that it's basically being sent from above to something below as if it's being released and then carrying something. Okay. And so that's a messenger. A messenger is being sent from above. Who's sending him? Allah. To someone below them. So it means that they have to be superior to their people. Okay. And they're bringing a message in themselves, so it's not just a letter that they're giving, they're embodying the message. And that's why I say emissary is better, because if you think about like an ambassador and an emissary, they represent their country, don't they? They're coming in themselves, they're like a message in themselves, if that makes sense. They're representing who the English people are, if he comes as an ambassador of English, of the UK. So that's a Rasul, okay? So it's got all those nuances in it there. Okay. The next one, kitab. What does that mean, Dilda? Say again. Good. A book. Is it a noun, verb, or particle? What's the 3-letter root? Have a guess. What's the first one? The 3 letters, the 3 foundational letters in that word. The first one is kaf. The second one, ta. Third one, now someone might say alif, but it's not the alif. It's the, you're right, it's the ba. This is now, so many words will have this three-letter root, kataba, in it. Okay? What does kataba mean? It means to engrave something so it doesn't change, like it's set in stone. Because in the old days, they never had these. This is a new invention, having binding. It was very expensive as well. Okay? In the old days, people didn't record things down in books like this. What did they record it down on? Stone. They might engrave it in stone. What else? Leather. Wood. Even they might have used papyrus, isn't it? Like that old Egyptian. It's like a older form of paper, but that was very expensive still. So generally, people on stone. So kitab does not necessarily mean book. It means something that has something engraved in it. It's like engraved, meaning that it doesn't change. So when Allah uses the word kitab, it means this is something that is set. Okay, you know, and a lot of the time, kitab in the Quran does not mean book. It means the law, because these are laws that are what? Written and set in stone. They don't change with time. They are set to give people some sort of a surety about where they're going in life. They need some, obviously some laws change depending on context and time, but the foundational laws, they don't change, and that makes people feel safe, doesn't it? If you're constantly changing laws and people don't know where they're coming or going, it makes them feel, it causes apprehensions and stuff. And so kitab has that nuance. That's very important. So this is what we're doing when we're seeing these words in the Quran. This is a large part of the course is appreciating what that word means. Why does Allah use that word, and why didn't He use another word that has a similar meaning? He wants to say something here. What's the next one? Deen. Now this is really interesting, this one. Deen. What did you say? Huh? Good. A religion. Is it noun, verb or particle? Now, so I know it's 9:03. I'm going to go up to quarter past because of the prayer and stuff. I just need to get these things in. Okay. If you need to go, you're fine to go if you need to. Now, Deen usually means a religion. What's the three-letter root? There's only three letters there. Dal, Ya, Noon. Now, this word means to abide by a system that restrains you. There's another word that comes from this word, which is Deen. So it's got a zabar, a fatha on it, instead of zay, the kasra. Deen. And a Deen is a debt. Because if you have a debt, you're restricted, aren't you? If you've come out of university with a debt, you can't just go do what you want. If you've got a mortgage, a house, you can't just do what you can't. You've got to think about things. You can't just spend as you want. You can't just go on holiday, can you? Because you've got to think about paying that off. So the nature of a deen is it restricts you and makes you abide by a certain law. So that's what religion does, if you think about it. For example, I decide to be a Muslim. So when that person offers me alcohol, I say to them, what? I can't have that because my religion restricts me from doing that. Okay? And everyone has a deen because we all restrict ourselves in some way, don't we? We're not, every human being, he doesn't do whatever he wants, he's restricted. So he abides by a system. Okay? And that's what deen means. It means you're restricting yourself, basically. Now, what's really interesting is in the Fatiha, Maliki Yawmid Deen. How's that usually translated, Maliki Yawmid Deen? The day of judgment. Anyone got anything other translation they've seen? The day of recompense. It doesn't mean any of those things. But the problem is you can't translate this word. It's so difficult. The day of Deen, and we've got to ask ourselves, always in the Quran, why did Allah say Yawm al-Deen? Why didn't He say Yawm al-Hisab? Why didn't He say Yawm al-Qiyamah? You've got to ask yourself because there's a context there. So the Yawm al-Deen means the day. On the day of judgment, everyone is held accountable according to one system. It's the day of one religion. Does that make sense? So in this life, you can have different rules, can't you? But on the day of judgment, everyone's going to be basically stand up, and there's only one system that you're going to be held accountable according to one set of laws that the judge is coming with. Does that make sense? That's what Yawm Deen means. Okay? So that's not, yeah, there is an element of judgment there, of course there is. But the nuance, the real subtle meaning there is that you're bound by something. So if you try to use a different system, it won't work, because it's the one system. Okay? So as you see now what you lose in the translation, and this is a really important part of studying the Quran. Next one, Rabb. What did you get there? Azad, did you get that one? God, okay. Anyone got anything different? A Lord, yeah. It's usually translated as a Lord. Now, to be honest, I'm not interested in how you translate it as long as you understand it. Because to translate is to limit the meaning. And so, Rabb, what's the three-letter root? Huh? Ra, ba, ba. Do you see the shidda, the little W on top? That tells you it's two of the same letter. So, rababa, the root meaning of rababa means to take a liquid and make it more and more solid until it becomes resilient. That's the essential meaning of Rabb. So Allah is the Rabb. He took us from what did He take us from? We were a liquid, a fluid, weren't we? And then we became the fetus, the flesh. We became more and more solid, didn't we, as we're growing? And even now as we grow, Allah's putting tests and challenges in our lives to make us more solid and resilient. And so that's the Rabb. The Rabb is the one doing that to you. So tarbiyah comes from this, like education, because education is toughening you up and getting you more wise about the world and getting you more resilient and stronger to deal with the challenges, isn't it? That's what education is. So that's our Rabb. Now that's lost in the translation, isn't it? Yeah, sustainer, you could. Yeah. But it's taking that thing that's so like fragile and hardening it up and making it until it's very beautiful the way. So is it noun, verb, or particle? No. Noun, okay. Next one, Nabi. What did you get there? Yeah. Say it again. Good. A prophet. Everyone happy with that? Was it a noun, verb, or particle? Noun. What's the three-letter root? This one's tricky, this one. What's the first one? Noon. Ba. Okay, not far. It's actually a Hamza. But there's a debate about this. There's a debate what the root letters are. But the strongest opinion is Naba'a. Okay? Naba'a means an astounding piece of news that blows you away. It's like new. So if I come up to Tasneem and I say to him, Tasneem, do you know that your last name is Malmoniat? If I pronounce it correctly? Malmoniat. Is that your last name? Oh, sorry, what's your last name? I don't know why I thought that. Huh? Ahmed. Why did I think? I saw someone else. I was thinking about. I don't know why I thought that. No, sorry. Yeah. Sorry, I was supposed to. So your name, you know, your last name is Ahmed. Is that astounding news for you? No. It's obvious news. But if I say, Tasneem, in 5 years' time, you're going to have a child, and that child will be the next Mahdi. Is that astounding news? You're like, whoa, that's a naba. It's something that blows you, like hits you and like, whoa, it's something news. So a Nabi is someone who's given that news or gives the news. So it can be passive or active. Does that make sense? Passive in terms of it's receiving that news, or active in terms of it's giving it. It can convey both meanings. So that's the meaning of a prophet. Now, prophet in English, what does prophet mean in English? Prophesize. What's that mean, to prophesize? Yeah, it could be. Yeah, not even that. It can be someone, like in English, it can be used as prophesize something. It's like you're ahead of your time. You're like sort of clued on to what's going on, so you can even see where things are going. So prophet, it's a very different word. And that's why Muslims a lot of the time misunderstand English people. They say, for example, in the news, they say, it's like he's a prophet. And we say, Tuba! He said he's a prophet. There's no prophet after Muhammad. Okay? But that's not what they mean. They mean basically he's like in touch with what's going on and can see what's probably... So it's used very differently in terms of that. So it's really important that we don't get caught in the translations. They mean very different things, and that's where a lot of confusion and misunderstandings happen between, because we take one language and impose its rules on another language. Okay? So that's right. Now, what's the difference between a Nabi and a Rasul? Theological tests.
The Rasul implements new Sharia.
Okay, go on.
And the Nabi continues with the previous Sharia.
Okay. You heard that one? So a prophet, a Rasul comes with a new book, yeah, and a Nabi is one that just follows on from another. Have you heard that definition? Okay. Has anyone heard any other definition? Sonia, it seems like you want to say something.
I was trying to say which way around it is. Every Rasul is...
Good. Yeah. So when we say he's a messenger, not a prophet, we're not dismissing he's a prophet. Because every messenger is a prophet, but not every prophet is a messenger. Does that make sense? So let's do some examples. Okay, Jesus, Isa alayhi salam, was he a prophet or messenger? Messenger, but he's both. He's both. He's a prophet, but he's also a messenger because he's received a new book. Okay? Okay, Idris. Why? Oh, miss out. Yeah. Now, that is the typical definition. It's got so many holes in it, that definition, though. Because Allah mentions many prophets that didn't receive books as Rasuls. So it doesn't hold weight. And it's one of this distinction between Nabi and Rasul is something that it seems it's obvious, but when you actually get into it, it's very complicated. And so all the scholars differ about this. However, I'm not interested in that, the theological side. I'm interested in why has Allah used Nabi why does he describe the Prophet ﷺ as Nabi sometimes, and why is he mentioning him as Rasul in other verses? So we want to look at it from that angle. My understanding, Allah is best, is that Rasul, when Allah mentions, and this is specific for the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, because he mentions them both. And there are other prophets that he will sometimes use Rasul for them. But my understanding is that when Allah uses Rasul for the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he's speaking about his station as a authority, and as an official title, yeah, and what he's brought to the people. Okay, does that make sense? Like his official title, like a headmaster or something. So Tasneem, imagine he was a headmaster of a school. I know him as a headmaster, but obviously we know him as Tasneem as well. It's a very different role. So your wife doesn't see you as a headmaster. Okay, she sees you as a husband. It's a different role. Does that make sense? And Nabi, when you see Nabi with the Prophet ﷺ, what I've noticed in the Quran is it's about his relationship with his ummah. It's much more personal. That's just what I've come in my reading. Okay, so these are the sort of things we want to be interested, we want to understand in the Quran now. Why does Allah use that word and not that word here, and pick up on these things? Does that make sense? So I'm not interested in the theological debate, but however, the strongest opinion actually was a very interesting one. He said that a Rasul is one that someone's had to. Sorry, what was it? A Rasul is someone who comes to a people who really reject him. Yeah. So Nuh, we don't hear about him as a book, but he's a Rasul. And he came to his people, and he had a hard time, didn't he? And he was coming to them, and they were idolaters, really struggle. While Adam is not a Rasul, he's a Nabi, and he had his children, who were his followers, he didn't really have a hard time with them. Okay, some of them might be naughty, but they didn't disobey. They didn't disbelieve in Allah, so it wasn't a real. Does that make sense? That's the strongest opinion I've heard about the distinction. But right, we've got 1 minute. Let's do one more, and then we wrap up, inshallah. So qara'a, what's qara'a mean? No, what's a word we know that comes from this root though? Yeah, Quran. Quran comes from this root, qara'a. What does it mean? To read or to recite. That's not the essential meaning of qara'a. Is it a verb, noun, or particle? Verb. It literally means he recited. He recited. Now, qara'a means to gather something and expel it. Because when you recite, what do? You read it, you look at it, don't you? And you bring those words into your mind, and then what do? Yeah? And what's really interesting, when they talk about in the Quran about a woman when she's going through a waiting period, how long is it? Well, obviously it depends on the circumstances, but generally it's 3 months, they say, isn't it? And the scholars differ, is that 3 pure cycles, or is it 3 menstrual cycles? And they use the word qur' in the Quran. Qur', because blood, what does a woman do? She gathers the blood at her womb, isn't it? And then expels it. Menses, that's basically what's happening. So that's what qara'a means. It means to gather something and expel it. Okay? Because when you're reciting something, you're gathering the words, those symbols in your head, and you're expelling them then. Okay? So it's very... profound that. Heather, this. So is it, now, I saw that on your paper, and now this is interesting. Azra and Shaheen, they said, this is. That's two different words. So what is it? This. It can't be both. But I understand why you did that. And we're going to see that in some examples. So we'll come to that later. So it's this. Is it a noun verbal particle? This.
No.
Yeah, because this, what is it? It's something, isn't it? So it must be a noun. And yawmun. What's yawmun? A day. Is it noun verbal particle? Noun. Yes, I talk about time is long, time is relative, you're speaking about it. Now, yawm does not mean a day, 24 hours. It means a specific determined time. Okay? And in the Quran, it's used in different ways. So it's zamanun mahdudun mutlaq. Yeah, it can be long time, it can be short time, and it's defined, but it's not. It's a limited amount of time, but it's not defined, if that makes sense. So it could be 24 hours, which is a limited time, but we don't necessarily know it's 24 hours. It could refer to another time. Okay. Now this is the last one, I promise. Okay, the last one is what? Sirat. Sirat, what's it mean? A journey, you say? A path? Okay. What did you say? A bridge? Okay, good. Hold on to that one. Okay, so a bridge or a road or a path or a journey, you've said. What's the three-letter root? Sad, Ra, Da. Yes, some say it's Sin, Ra, Da, and it's been changed, but we don't need to go into that. Okay, it means to swallow something. A sirat means a wide road that's clear, and it's only in the Quran. It's only ever used as a singular. So when we say Ihdina sirat al-mustaqim, we're saying lead me to the wide path. So in Arabic, you say you've got to keep on the straight. What do we say in English? You've got to keep on the straight and narrow, as if the right path is really narrow. But in Arabic, it's the straight and wide, because the truth is clear in reality. Okay, and it's an idea that basically it's encompassing as well. Many people can tread it. So when you're saying sirat, all these nuances are there. It's basically wide, it's clear, it's encompassing for people to come on. That's what we say when we mean that. Okay. Now, Shaheen's a very good question. She thought, because the sirat is also described as what? No. We want to go there. What is it? The bridge where? Going over hell. And someone brought this up in Blackburn. They put me on the spot. Okay. They said, hang on a minute. How could it be wide? Because it's supposed to be what? Thin as a hair. Yeah, that narration is actually from a Sahabi that said that. It wasn't the Prophet saying it's as thin as a hair, sharp as a sword. But we always know that the Sahaba, the companions, generally when they say something that couldn't be known, it must be from the Prophet ﷺ. But one scholar, he actually picked it, he says, yes, it's narrow as a sword for the disbeliever. But for the believer that's taken over, it suddenly seems expansive. Okay, so that was a nice little way out of it. But there's another point that comes up here. It's really important. Is that word sirat being used as a bridge over hell is not used in the Quran. It's from hadith. And when we're studying this language, it's in order to understand the Quran's language, because the language of hadith and the language of normal Arabic is different to the language of the Quran. And the Quran is a very special divine quality. And so Allah uses a specific word and it has all those meanings, whilst not necessarily in other contexts. Does that make sense? So for example, qalb, what does that mean? Heart, qalb. Qalb in the Quran, qalb, one of the meanings of qalb is to flip, but in the Quran it never has that meaning. In the qalb, heart in the Quran means it's something that it's like deep rooted and strong. Okay, it's like that's the meaning of qalb in the Quranic language. Whilst outside of the Quranic language, yes, it can have the meaning of flipping, and that's why the Prophet ﷺ made the dua, Ya muqallib al-qulub, thabbit qalbi ala dinik. O turner of hearts, the muqallib, keep firm my heart, the one, because it can flip, and because a heart can do that. One day it wants something, another day it wants something else. But in the Quran, it's never used like that. It means the faculty that's rooted and strong, basically. And so it's used differently. So we've got to understand that as well. So that gives an appreciation of that. What we do is, for the revision class, we're not going to do any more. This is all the lesson. We've finished off the vocabulary in the revision class, but I'm just going to give you more examples. We're going to go over the nouns, verbs, and particles. We're going to talk about the revision techniques as well, and I'll give you some help in terms of remembering vocabulary. And then so we'll go over that in the revision session, and then we will finish the chapter in the next lesson, which is next Monday. Okay, so it would be handy 48 hours before the lesson just to go over the stuff. Okay, is that okay for everybody? Okay, سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك عملنا سوى ظلمنا أنفسنا وإن لم تغفر لنا وترحمنا لنكونن من الخاسرين سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون سلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. Thank you very much.